The Doctor is a far more complex and expansive character than many people realise. Now, we've already covered some misconceptions that both casual viewers and hardcore fans might have about Doctor Who in general, but what about the Doctor themselves? Well, let's take a look at some, shall we? I'm Ellie with Who Culture, here with 10 things everyone always gets wrong about the Doctor. Number 10. William Hartnell was ancient when he took the role. Issue 10 of Doctor Who Adventures, released in 2006, featured an image of William Hartnell as the first Doctor, next to the caption, "Meet the very first Doctor." Yikes, he's ancient. Now, this may have seemed the case to younger fans upon seeing Hartnell's face, and the more grandfatherly portrayal of the first Doctor, plus the long white wig, would likely do nothing to dissuade them of this notion. Part of this misconception is also likely down to the actor's ailing health and untimely death in 1975. However, William Hartnell wasn't actually as old as everyone thinks he was when he played the Doctor. At the age of 55, Hartnell was actually 20 years younger than David Bradley was when he filmed his first scene as the first Doctor in The Doctor Falls. Meanwhile, Peter Capaldi was merely a few months younger than William Hartnell when he began his tenure as the 12th Doctor. More surprisingly still, 14th Doctor David Tennant is now 51, only 4 years younger than Hartnell was. It would seem that actors clearly just look after themselves a bit better these days. Or, we put them in costumes that don't make them look old, like a white wig. Number 9. The Doctor always regenerates in the TARDIS. Jodie Whittaker's regeneration wasn't just a big deal because of who she regenerated into, it also marked the first time in the modern era that the Doctor regenerated outside the TARDIS. This idea of the Doctor always regenerating in the TARDIS took hold during the Russell T Davies years, and you'd be forgiven for thinking that there was a precedent in the classic series. However, it's only the 1st, 5th and 6th Doctors who actually regenerate inside the TARDIS, and with much less damage to their surroundings, might we add. So it's odd that this notion has stuck with the show since it returned in 2005, especially given how unsafe it is to regenerate inside the TARDIS. The 6th Doctor is under attack when he regenerates, and the TARDIS appears to operate itself in the 10th planet. In the modern series, everything explodes and a slightly frazzled Doctor momentarily forgets what the hell is going on. So it's no wonder really that the TARDIS eventually ejected the 13th Doctor out the doors at the end of Twice Upon a Time. She's clearly learned her lesson, and hopefully the show has too. Number 8. The Doctor always travels with a young female companion. Comedy sketches about Doctor Who have existed for almost as long as the show itself. Hell, the first known parody was broadcast just over a month after An Unearthly Child, when the TV show It's a Square World featured a sketch with Dad's Army actor Clive Dunn as William Hartnell. Since then, there have been many more, and most of them are based on some well-worn and inaccurate interpretations of what Doctor Who actually is. One of the most common of these is that the Doctor always travels with a young female companion that they want to get jiggy with. This is one of the gags in Lenny Henry's Doctor Who sketch from 1985, the main gag in a sketch from A Kick Up the 80s in 1982, and Stephen Moffat went there because of course he did in The Curse of Fatal Death. David Tennant even dressed up as a sexy Doctor Who companion to face off against Alan Carr on the Friday Night Project. However, the history of Doctor Who's weird and wonderful companions is a far richer vein for comedy than these sketches suggest. A clapped-out shape-shifting android, an overgrown schoolboy, a robot dog? Then again, perhaps those were deemed to be beyond parody. Number 7. The classic Doctors were all posh. Christopher Eccleston spoke of wanting to have a northern accent because a posh voice would imply that only upper-class people could be hyper-intelligent like the Doctor. The notion of a posh Doctor certainly influences a lot of the parody versions, particularly American spoofs like the Inspector Spacetime gag in Community, but those types of characters aren't really reflected in the casting of the Doctor. While it's certainly true that the 1st and 3rd Doctors had what could be classed as establishment voices, that doesn't tell the full story. William Hartnell grew up in London slums without ever knowing his father. Tom Baker was working on a building site when he was cast as the Doctor. In his youth, Peter Davison's father was a greengrocer, and after leaving school, Davison was briefly an odd jobs man who once worked as a mortuary attendant. Ultimately, the Doctor is a Time Lord, and that may have affected the performances of the previous actors. However, even with that in mind, the Doctor's voice is very rarely posh or snooty, and the character certainly doesn't hold themselves in such a manner. Number 6. Never cruel or cowardly originated in New Who. Nowadays, the line "never be cruel, never be cowardly" is inextricably linked with Peter Capaldi's pre-regeneration speech in Twice Upon a Time. However, this is merely a reference to a description of the Doctor's character that has existed for decades. Although never properly stated on screen until the day of the Doctor, it first featured in a 70s book by Doctor Who legends Terrance Dicks and Malcolm Hulke called The Making of Doctor Who. The book features this description of the Doctor, one that would define the character for decades to come. The Doctor believes in good and fights evil. Though often caught up in violent situations, he is a man of peace. He is never cruel or cowardly. It would take another 40 years for this description to be mentioned on screen, but it comes at exactly the right moment, when the 10th and 11th Doctors join forces to avert the War Doctor's Gallifreyan genocide. Number 5. Their name is Doctor Who. Doctor Who is the name of the show, the Doctor is the name of the character. Is to Doctor Who fans what Frankenstein is the name of the scientist is to horror fans. But is that really true? From 1963 to 1981, the character was credited as both Doctor Who, as in DR, and Doctor Who, as in DOCTOR. In the War Machines, the super-intelligent computer Votan states that Doctor Who is required, while the second Doctor refers to himself as Doctor Who, albeit in German, in the Highlanders. Doctor Who and the Silurians is the literal name for the Jon Pertwee serial, while a large number of Target novelizations refer to the character as Doctor Who as well. When the show returned in 2005, Christopher Eccleston was credited as Doctor Who, but when David Tennant was cast, he insisted on being credited as the Doctor because he's a massive fanboy. Although he was also a massive fanboy, Capaldi didn't insist on reverting his credit, but wonderfully referred to the character as Doctor Who in press interviews. However, arguably the clearest answer to this debate came in The Name of the Doctor, which asserted that the Doctor is the name that was chosen. Not that that will stop people continuing to call the Doctor Doctor Who in years to come. Number 4. Jelly Babies originated with Tom Baker. Jelly Babies are synonymous with Tom Baker. There's no argument there, and most appearances of the delicious confection are of course nods to the iconic 4th Doctor. Jelly Babies are found on the 7th Doctor's person when he's shot in San Francisco, while the Ganger Doctor offers Jelly Babies to the real 11th Doctor in the voice of Tom Baker no less. However, the Doctor's love for Jelly Babies didn't actually originate with Baker's Doctor, and it goes back much further than the 1970s. The first reference to a Jelly Baby in Doctor Who actually dates back to 1968's second Doctor serial, The Dominators. Here, the second Doctor munches on some Jelly Babies while waiting inside one of the travel capsules. When Troughton returns to the show for the 3 Doctors, the second Doctor offers the Brigadier a Jelly Baby in the TARDIS. The second Doctor still has Jelly Babies to hand in the 5 Doctors, so it's the Doctor's second incarnation who first got a taste for them rather than the 4th like most people think. Number 3. The Doctor often experiences post-regenerative trauma. From Castrovalva onwards, every regeneration has been followed by some degree of trauma. The 5th Doctor can barely keep it together for the majority of that serial, and later the 6th Doctor is so disorientated by the process that he throttles his companion. Then, in a post-regenerative funk, the 7th Doctor believes the Rani to be Mel and plays along with her scheme until he sees the error of his ways. This tradition continued into the TV movie and then the Christmas Invasion. Thankfully, Stephen Moffat appeared to dispense with this tiresome trope when he introduced Matt Smith. But when Matt Smith regenerated into Capaldi, it was back to the out-of-control, unpredictable state of flux. It's hard to see where this trope originated from, especially as the 2nd Doctor's companions are more put out by his regeneration than he is. His only concern is whether he can still call himself the Doctor, which he soon proves that he can. It's likely the result of his forced regeneration into the 3rd Doctor that set the ball rolling, a process that has been seen to be fairly traumatic. Pertwee's amnesiac state in Spearhead from Space is likely what set the tone for the Doctor's subsequent regenerations, but thankfully the 14th Doctor knows exactly who he is. Or does he? Number 2. The numbering matters. Doctor Who fans are pretty passionate about 2 things. One is that the show needs reinvigorating to appeal to a modern audience, and 2 is that the numbering of the Doctors is some hard and fast rule. Interestingly, these 2 things are currently in direct conflict with each other. Promoting Ncuti Gatwa as the 15th Doctor implicitly suggests to audiences that they have to catch up on the previous 14. New audiences just wouldn't bother, would they? There's even some debate as to whether Tennant is actually the 14th Doctor, despite Russell T Davies stating that as a fact. The timeline Timeless Child was a flawed attempt by Chris Chibnall to detonate the fandom's obsession with the numbering of doctors. After discovering that she's lived countless lives that she wasn't previously aware of, the 13th Doctor ultimately decides that the only thing that's important is who she is now. That's the real message of The Timeless Child, but it got buried in all the controversy. Regardless, for the audience at home, the numbering of the Doctors only really matters when they're at the local pub quiz. David Tennant may be the 14th Doctor, but chances are there'll be riots in pubs across the UK where non-fans get a point for saying it's Ncuti Gatwa. Number 1. The Doctor is a pacifist. Make the foundation of the society a man who never would. The 10th Doctor, the Doctor's daughter. Except he would, and he has. The Doctor's history of pacifism and his distaste towards guns and violence has largely defined the 21st century era of the show. However, this history is very patchy indeed. In the Doctor's very first on-screen adventure into the past, he almost brained a caveman with a rock. The Reign of Terror then sees the First Doctor batter a man around the head with a shovel. Some might say that the First Doctor was a little bit unfinished and softened with age, but just look at the evidence from other Doctors. The 4th Doctor smashed through a skylight and twisted a guy's neck in The Seeds of Doom. The 5th Doctor blasted a Cyberman to death in Earthshock and put a gun to Davros's head in Resurrection of the Daleks. The 6th Doctor strangled his companion, threw some henchmen in an acid bath, and gassed Shockeye to death. The 11th Doctor left Solomon to die in Dinosaurs on a spaceship. The man who never would? Yeah, if you say so. And that concludes our list. If you think we missed something, then do let us know in the comments below, and while you're there, don't forget to like and subscribe and tap that notification bell so you never miss a Who Culture video again. Also head over to Twitter and follow us there, and Instagram as well, and I can be found across various social medias just by searching Ellie Littlechild. Don't forget to look out for Sean Ferrick as well, and Dan the Meeks too. I've been Ellie with Who Culture, and in the words of River Song herself, goodbye, sweeties.